Hey guys, what's going on? I just read 3 books, all of them featuring unlikable main characters. It was kind of rough. I'm a little behind in my reading challenge now, but that's okay. First book we got here, To Your Scattered Bodies Go by Phillip Jose Farmer. The first book in the Riverworld series. Not really character driven, luckily. More concept driven. It's pretty cool actually. When you die, you're reincarnated onto this vast green plain with a river running right through it. People from all different eras are included, so you could have a Neanderthal and some future alien in the same community. And everyone's just plopped there and told to figure it out. You have this metal cup that attaches to these stone platforms that fills up with food and tobacco and this psychoactive gum. Dream gum, they call it. Very Hunger Games like. Also kind of like a custom Minecraft map, which I don't know if that's ever been done before, but that would be pretty interesting. So our main character does have some unwholesomeness in his past. I don't know if he's meant to be unlikable. I think just with age, he's turned into this chauvinistic Hemingway character, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, bullheaded. But back in the day, I think as far as this book goes, he was just a guy that got stuff done, you know? But very early on, he kind of skeeved me out. The way these stone platforms work is they're occasionally struck by lightning, which produces the energy needed to create all the resources. And one poor sucker figures this out by being on top of the stone platform when it happens, so everyone's kind of gathered around looking at his charred corpse. And then the love interest walks into frame, and the main character is like, 10 out of 10 body, 7 out of 10 face, and it's just not the right time. It's very tone deaf, just kind of rabid sexuality. Which this kind of man, barrel-chested, conflict-driven, you know, it kind of fits the bill, but it's icky. You know, it's icky, and I know that's not a very scientific word, but that's the best word I got for it. So this guy quickly gathers a ragtag group of people from different eras, and it's interesting to see the way that they all mix together. Kind of unreasonable, the timeline he gives. They make this boat really quickly, and then all of a sudden they go on this 400-day journey. As if all these people from all these different eras could just live on a boat together for 400 days without any training or anything. But that kind of solidified the kind of book that this was. It's fun, it's an adventure, it's light, it's not something to be poked and prodded and examined. And after I got into that mindset, I enjoyed it. The writing was rough at times. I'm not a person that requires fanciful prose in order to fully enjoy something, but even I kind of grimaced a few times going through this book. He has this obsession with facial features, and I don't get that detailed in my reading. My mental picture of books rarely includes things like how many lines they had on their forehead, or how high their cheekbones were, or what their jawline looks like, that kind of thing. But he constantly was putting in details like that put me out of the story. Oh, and also when you're resurrected, nobody has any hair. So he kept talking about these women and how attractive they were, but they didn't have eyebrows. And if you've ever seen someone without eyebrows, it's alarming. So I don't care what kind of bone structure these women have, if this naked, hairless woman is walking up to me, I'm gonna be a little apprehensive at first. And I kept picturing all these people without eyebrows, which didn't help anything. He also likes to describe things in terms of feet and yards, which got old after a while. They entered a courtyard that was 150 feet long and 10 feet wide, and the ceilings were 8 feet tall. It makes sense, you know, you can picture that, but it's just so dry and boring and ugly. All that being said, I did really enjoy the concept, and I was hungry. I was eager to figure out what was going on. And Phillip Jose Farmer obviously knew that. That's what he uses to string you along. But the end is such an egregious cliffhanger. I found it hard to forgive him for that. It's a series. He wanted me to read the other books. I get that. But he leads you so far to tell you absolutely nothing. It was frustrating, and that's what I left this book with. So maybe I'm coming off a little worse than it really deserved. But that's what I felt. The next book I read is The Moviegoer by Walker Percy. I found this at Goodwill. I'd never heard of it, but then I was taking the sticker off and I was reading the synopsis on the back, and it's about a guy named Jack who lives in New Orleans, and he goes to the movies a lot, and he's kind of trying to figure things out. He's not sure his place in the world. And I was like, hey, I can relate to that. So I figured I'd read it. Best way I can describe him is like a 1960s stock bro. He's a womanizer. He's rich, he's jaded, and he has this very analytical approach to trying to find meaning in the world that's just very frustrating to look at from an outside perspective because of how misguided it is, how misguided it seems to me. That's the whole point of an unlikable main character, is to see these negative traits from a third-person perspective. And especially for me, I know I'm overly analytical. So I can see that, and I can see how useless it is in certain scenarios in a way that I wouldn't be able to see if I'm looking directly inward. But I can see it at a distance, and then I can attribute it to myself and safely analyze it without tearing apart all these delicate, fragile innards within me. He's searching for meaning. He's searching for something other than the mundaneness of it all, the weight of the everydayness, as he says. And he's trying to find it as one tries to find the answer to a mathematical question, which, as you may guess, doesn't prove fruitful. But he's tasked with helping out his cousin who's going through a bout of depression, and through that he realizes that he's going through it as well, just more of a silent bout. This was written in the 60s, and I think that's about the time religion started to deteriorate. And it wasn't such a hard and fast life choice. So, especially for these first people, after the deterioration of religion, they must have had a hard time trying to figure out everything without that vital part. Without that part that's played a huge role in life up until exactly then. And even now, I feel the same thing, as if we've been handed life, but without a huge chunk of it there anymore. And that's not anybody's fault, it's just how it's played out. But it's hard to try and fill in that massive void without any reasonable substitute. And I think that's what the main character was trying to do here. But the approach was a bit unfounded. And did he realize that at the end? I don't know. This was another one with a very unsatisfying ending. There's not really anything to spoil per se, but it was supposed to end during Mardi Gras, which I assume would be some celebration, some kind of climax, and some kind of minor realization, maybe. But then they don't even end up in New Orleans for Mardi Gras. It's like the anti-climax. And maybe that's what Walker Percy was going for. People were expecting some kind of answer, and he's like, nope, there's not one. It is what it is. Which is the most unsatisfying answer there is, but one I tell myself all the time. This is supposed to be like a Southern classic, and I don't exactly know what that means. It did have Catcher in the Rye vibes. I did compare this guy to Holden Caulfield a few times. There wasn't that much going on in this book, but it forced you to pay attention to what was going on, which were things that were kind of hard to look at up close, which I liked about the book. I think it did affect me negatively, and then without any kind of a satisfying answer, I was just left to deal with them myself, which ultimately is the answer. No one's going to find the meaning in your life for you. So you got to figure it out yourself. Maybe that was the realization. But ultimately, I thought this was a very blunt display of life's less sexy features, and that everyone deals with them. It's the human condition. It's not anything special. We're all fighting it every day. We're all out here. It was tough at the end to find that sunny spot to lay down and bask in the overall message of the book, but I think I found it, ultimately. And lastly, by far the best book I've read of these three, In Cold Blood by Truman Capote. This is one of those rare books where I actually agree with all the blurbs on the back. It is indeed a masterpiece. It is indeed a spellbinding work. But one thing I didn't like was that it spoils the whole thing on the back, which I know it's nonfiction, so it really happened, so the spoilers were already out there, but I didn't know. Apparently in the 50s, there was this really grisly murder that happened somewhere in Kansas. This family of shining beacons. The dad was the leader of the 4-H club, a business owner. The children were all straight A's, great athletes kind of thing. And one day they were all just brutally murdered in their own home. The first couple of chapters sets up this scene, and inevitably, you ask yourself, who could do such a thing? And then you meet them. And they are, as you would expect, troubled people with troubled pasts that found themselves in this unfortunate circumstance. Like Vonnegut says, we're all a series of accidents. And the book takes on the really difficult task of having you find sympathy for these criminals. It spends the first chapters making it really hard for itself in order for you to come out the other side feeling like these people deserved a better shot. And that is the most noble aim for an unlikable main character, is for you to find sympathy for these people that do horrible things. And that's one really good thing about books with unlikable main characters, is it gives you the real-world skill of finding sympathy for those people that screw you over. Could be as minor as some traffic incident, or as major as this, where some person kills your entire family. And you're supposed to find sympathy for them. You're supposed to look at their past and say, well, they were screwed over in A, B, C, and D ways, so really, they're more of a victim than I am. That's a hard ask. It's a really hard ask. But that's real. You know, it's super easy to find sympathy for the knight in shining armor who stands up to fight the dragon, but that's not the real world. That's never the real world. The real world is full of gray areas and full of hard asks. So I commend Truman Capote for writing this, which is an extremely difficult task he undertook here, and he did it really well. It reminds me of Dahmer. I think Netflix put out this show last year. Everyone was talking about it. And not that my wife and I are true crime people, but it was big enough where we were interested, and I liked the guy who played Dahmer, and I think he did really well as Dahmer. But we watched the first couple episodes, and it's a very similar thing where it sets up this real-world villain, and it tries to sympathize them. And it did. And I found myself connecting to Dahmer and thinking I had a lot of similar memories. I had some similar things happen to me, and it made me realize I'm just a few bends in the trail away from being the guy. I'm just a few dominoes away from being Dahmer. All of us are. So then what is evil? Evil isn't something I can hate. Evil isn't something I can fear. Evil is something that is within everyone. And under certain circumstances, it blooms. It really shook me. I had to stop watching that show because of how much I sympathized with this guy and how I had to deconstruct some permanent structures in my brain because evil was no longer this dark castle on a moonlit hill. Evil was everywhere. And In Cold Blood is very similar. It goes through the backstory of these two unfortunate individuals, and by the end, I wasn't rooting for the death penalty, even though the back told me that that was inevitably what happened, which is another testament to Capote's expertise, is that he could have me read this book, and it's a pretty long book, even though I knew exactly what happened. I was really impressed with his ability to do that. It's funny, I just finished this book yesterday. I biked to the park to film some B-roll, which you're about to see, and to finish this book. And on my way home, this black van just bursts past me, and this guy's head comes out the window and he starts screaming profanities at me. And I stop on my bike and I just watch as they go, and I see they have a bumper sticker. It says antisocial on it. And I had just finished this book, and I had all these thoughts going through my head about how sympathy can be found anywhere if you dig deep enough into a person's past. But then I'm thinking, well, then anything can be excused by assuming mental illness. And then I'm thinking, well, maybe we are all mentally ill in certain ways. And then I was thinking, okay, maybe I don't want to go any further down that dark mental alleyway, and I stopped. But it was just so apparent right there, antisocial. So I found sympathy for them. I mean, obviously I wasn't offended or anything by them screaming profanities at me. I was just more confused. But I found reason. I found a route to understand them. And I think that is the way to sympathy. It was hard fought. It's not easy. It was not an easy route to get there, but Truman Capote helped me with that. So, a new route to sympathy, always good. One of the reasons I read, right? And that's what I got for you today. So, as always, thanks for watching. See you next time. Bye-bye.